Okay, so we're back at the oil market, and let's talk about let's try and picture the oil market like it was maybe in the 19th century, or let's think about the oil market like people did in the 19th century. So this is like sort of not the heyday of industrialism, but like when people were figuring out, oh, this black gold stuff, you can use it for stuff. So we're going to just sort of forget about the fact that fossil fuels cause global warming for a second, and just imagine that the benefit that people get from oil and the costs that are involved in producing oil are sort of like the full story in terms of societal welfare when it comes to oil. So what are we going to do? We're going to start on the supply side, and we're going to think about different suppliers of oil. And we're going to put a dot to start with that's pretty close to the origin. Now, just to sort of tell you a little bit of an intuitive story, let's imagine that this producer of oil is the person. She's a ranch owner, and she's just got oil like bubbling up out of the fields, like Beverly Hillbilly style. That's an old time TV show. Anyway, where this happens, oil is just coming out of the ground, seeping out of the ground. And let's say that the market for that oil is like across the street. All right. So there's not a lot of oil that this producer can offer, but they also don't really need to earn much from it because it's basically free. It's just coming up out of the ground, right? Now let's imagine that that as soon as that other neighbors have this sort of same experience. And so we're going to add a little bit of oil here because we've got another producer, and let's say that this producer is I'm going to go all the way over here. Let's say that this producer also can produce oil for relatively cheap, but they're further away from the market, so they've got to drive a little bit, and so this is like just the bubbling out of the ground. This is the like. Is it worth it to draw you pictures? I think so. This is like the little truck. I'm gonna refer back to these folks. So all right, the trucker oil producer, and then let's say there's this other producer that can add a lot of oil to the market, add a lot, but let's say they're like here. They've got like one of those oil derrick things, but but they've got to drill deep, so it's more costly, right? So this basically sort of traces out a line of supply to the market, and the intuition here is that what we've been capturing along the vertical axis as more and more quantity along the horizontal axis is added is that these different producers have different costs, right? They have, and you can think about this as like sort of the floor for their willingness to sell oil in the market. They'd love to get prices that are way up here, right? That would be really nice. They would command quite a profit, but at the very least, they've got to recoup their costs, which are down, which are sort of like identified along that line, right? Now, we can also think about this on sort of the supply side. And let's think about this sort of same point near the origin. Well, let's say there's only one barrel of oil sort of making it to market. What's the person who's likely to sort of want that first barrel of oil, and how much would they be willing to pay for it? And in my little story, I'm going to put a dot way up here and say that this is a person who has discovered that they can make like candles, paraffin candles out of oil. And That's a candle, I guess. Lamp oil too. Anyway, this person has discovered that there are ways that they can use oil to generate light, and there's a bunch of rich people in the neighborhood who really like to read their fancy books at night, and so this person can turn that input and make a tidy profit out of generating light. Turns out oil also makes asphalt. So let's say that out here, a whole bunch more quantity would be demanded by the town that discovers that they can pave their roads with asphalt. It's got to be not super expensive though, right? Like the price has to drop to a certain amount to make that affordable, but that's the roadway. Here's my roadway, and they're paving it and putting lines. Good. Then let's say that there's some point at which like oil is just so dirt cheap, like down here, right? That everybody's using it, and so out here we've got a point where somebody's just like making bouncy balls. I don't know, some bouncy ball factory. They're like the most luxurious bouncy balls ever, but they're kind of like, why not? Because oil's cheap, and so you can sort of. Oh, is this going to be hard to do a line? Let's say that's kind of roughly where it is. Just you could move this point up there. All right. So basically what we've got here is a picture of demand, right? And demand is, of course, these people along, Candlestick Maker or the town would love to have to spend less, right? They would love to have prices that were cheaper. So in some sense, this represents their sort of maximum willingness to pay for those given quantities. Now, so let's add some labels here. So I've told you that this is, where can I put it? This is demand. And I've told you that this is supply. Okay. Now I'm gonna sort of add another way of describing supply and demand that sort of tracks along with my story, and I'm going to tell you that demand is also the private marginal benefit, which is equal to the willingness to pay. And I'm going to tell you that the supply is the private marginal cost. Now, there's some content to that conceptual move, right? I think I've tried to sort of prime the intuition about why it makes sense to equate these things, but this, I think, is actually a discussion question. What do you think about the assumption that demand is marginal private benefit and supply marginal private cost? Like, when do you think this is true? When not? What do you think the implications are of making this assumption? We're going to work with this to start and talk about how demand or private marginal benefit and supply private marginal cost meet at a certain point in the next little segment. But one last note is the marginal sort of word can be a little bit sort of puzzling. Basically, for now, just think about the fact that we've been going unit by unit, right? And what we're tracing out is the reservation, price, or the willingness to pay for the next unit of oil that enters the market. Marginal also relates to derivatives. So if you know your calculus, like, you can understand a little bit about where that sort of connection gets drawn. But let's pause there.